Good morning, one and all, and welcome back to the Darren Report. I'm John Iadarola, very excited to be joined on the show once again by the one, the only, the indisputable Dr. Rashad Richey. Welcome back to the Darren Report.
My dear brother, always good to see you, man. Thank you for the invite.
It's great to have you here. You've been doing amazing things inside Indisputable, outside of Indisputable. So it's great to have you back.
Thank you.
And it's great to have the audience here as well. Thank you for watching, because we got a lot to talk about over the course of today's show. Not only we're going to be addressing the president of Ukraine's address to Congress, but also the reception that he got. A lot of people very enthused about it. A couple standouts not buying what they were hearing. We'll reveal those. We've also got, while most people seem to agree that getting into a hot war with Russia kind of a bad idea, there are some who are in favor of it. We've got a senator for you, as well as some reporters at the White House press briefing who they don't want to come out and say it necessarily, but they are really interested in this thing going further than it has so far. And then besides that, we've got crazy comments from candidates. We've got horrible activities from cops, although this time not in the US, interestingly, as well as the continued social media effort to bring like service industry workers into their world and exploit them, at least in my view. We're gonna have a little debate about it a little bit later on. But before that, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button and sharing the stream so that people know we're live, that would be great. And you can send us comments, tweets, super chats, and all that. And Rashad and I will respond as we go. But with all that said, Rashad, are you ready to talk about some news?
Let's kick it.
Okay, let's do it. Let's start with this.
Now I'm almost 45 years old. Today my age stopped when the hearts of more than 100 children stopped beating. I see no sense in life if it cannot stop the death.
That is a bit of President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine addressing Congress just before we went live today, talking there about the continued deaths of civilians, advocating for his country in the best way that he knows how. He did have a lot more to say. We want to give you a bit more of that here.
And this is my main mission as the leader of my people, great Ukrainians. And as the leader of my nation, I'm addressing the President Biden. You are the leader of the nation, of your great nation. I wish you to be the leader of the world. Being the leader of the world means to be the leader of peace. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
So in addition to what you saw there, he also played a video that had been put together of attacks on a number of different cities in Ukraine, showing civilians trying to flee the area. It was powerful stuff, but as you can probably tell from that last clip, he wasn't just giving an update, he was advocating for continued US help, but also more US help, getting more directly involved, including continuing to call for a no-fly zone. He said he was very thankful for what the US has done, but he wants a no-fly zone. He also wants the US to facilitate the Polish transfer of Soviet-era MiG fighter jets, both of which the United States has refused to do so far. They've said that those are lines that they're not willing to cross. Zelensky also called for additional sanctions on Russia, including targeting members of the Kremlin. Obviously, some of that has already happened. He believes that there is more that could be done there. And so Rashad, this is where it gets into a little bit difficult territory. Like, everybody feels compassion for what's going on there and wants as much help as possible. But I think we all largely agree there are certain lines that could plausibly lead to a much wider conflict if the US were to cross it. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. So let's look at what's happening. And I draw some wisdom from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said that anytime America is engaged in international conflict, it desensitizes Americans to domestic issues, where those issues take a back burner to the actual war or the pending war that's in front of us. So that's one truth that we must always remember. Ukraine is being attacked unlawfully. I feel for the people in Ukraine. I also feel for the Russians, not the leadership, but the majority of Russian citizens who do not agree with this invasion and who are risking not only their lives, but obviously their freedom to make sure that their proclamation is known. They don't know what we know. We take for granted, John, that people in Russia are able to know everything that we know. They're not. They are intentionally left in the dark. Their information is manipulated so that there can be a sales pitch. I actually agree with what our Ukrainian leader has done in this context. There's always a pitch when it comes to war. There's a sales pitch, and then there's a rebuttal. He's trying to make the rebuttal, and this is all waged in the parameters of our thinking. He wants to popularize his point of view in the international context. That's a good strategy because war is as much about how we think about war as what we do in the implementation of it.
Yeah, and we're in such a weird position because as we've been breaking down, developments every day here, and there are a ton of things that the US apparently can plausibly do to help in Ukraine that seem like if you're gonna have a category of things that we would do that Russia would then interpret as a direct act of war, like the fact that transferring the planes to Poland and then them transferring it wouldn't be a provocation, although Poland disagrees with that, or sending thousands of rocket launchers in, that's not a provocation. But like if we were to directly transfer the planes, that would be. For a lot of regular people, I think it is difficult to understand exactly why the lines are drawn in the way that they are. But it appears that the lines have been drawn that way.
And well, Russia did it. Russia supplied weapons to other nations that went to war with us. They had no problem doing that while saying at the same time they were not engaged with conflict in America.
Yeah, it's just always struck me as weird that you can like hand over a rocket launcher, but you can't pull the trigger.
Right.
And I get that's where we've landed. But it is a difficult thing because people feel a lot of compassion for what's happening right now. But if what's happening right now, the war is a bad thing. A far wider war with a nuclear power, a lot scarier perhaps than what we're seeing right now. Now, I want to give you a little bit more of President Zelensky's comments. He says, remember Pearl Harbor, the terrible morning of December 7th, 1941, when your sky was black from the planes attacking you. Remember September 11th, a terrible day in 2001, when evil tried to turn your cities, independent territories into battlefields, when innocent people were attacked from the air. Our country is experiencing the same every day right now at this moment. Every night for 3 weeks now, Russia has turned the Ukrainian sky into a source of death for thousands of people. And so that's difficult stuff. And like, I think this is his best bet to try to change people's minds. But it is a difficult ask to draw the US into something that could be far wider, that could end up pulling in other NATO countries. They have thousands of weapons of mass destruction. It's terrifying stuff. I get Zelensky's position, but a wider war hardly seems like it's in anyone's interest.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's Zelensky trying to make a case, obviously, in the minds and hearts of individuals who may watch that. Remember, he has a background in media, so he understands messaging. I'm surprised he did not do this earlier. He took a very different tone in the beginning of this conflict. But let's be very clear. A few decades ago, this would have been a no-brainer for other nations to get involved immediately into direct conflict with Russia. That has now changed. The sentiment of war has changed, and here's why. We look at the outcome. And the outcome for a full engagement with Russia means a whole lot of people in America and other nations are going to be dead. That is going to be the outcome. Now we understand the assault on democracy, and it is a violation of international law. But none of these countries have clean hands, John, not even the United States of America. So we're really talking about bad guys against worse guys is the scenario here. And if we can continue a diplomatic protocol as it relates to our engagement with Russia, weaken their military capabilities because of that diplomatic protocol, and continue to double down on the sanctions, not only of Vladimir Putin and his cronies, but also those that empower him, you may have an outcome that is a peaceful outcome, or more peaceful than going into full warfare.
And that has been the goal from the very beginning, just hoping that whatever it is that is done pushes Russia in a position where they feel like some sort of cessation of hostilities is in their best interests. And I think that while I disagree with what Biden has done in virtually every other area of his presidency, generally in this area, it seems like that's what he is actually working towards, not getting us involved in a full-fledged, World War III with Russia. The economic damage that Russia is suffering, there are certainly side effects of that I think are terrible. The idea that regular Russian citizens, many of whom are protesting against this, will be affected, that bothers me profoundly. But Russia has to feel like they have more to gain by ending this war than by continuing it. And if we can't, and I think we can all agree, we cannot get to that point by sending tons of M1s, over the border or something like that, then Ukraine holding out militarily while we put pressure on them diplomatically and financially, that's the best way to get to that. And even Zelensky now says, as of this morning, that Russian peace talk positions are moving in a more realistic direction. And why not? They are not accomplishing their goals, certainly not at the pace that they thought. The protests continue, their stock market is decimated. Like Putin is gonna put forward a strong face and everything, but he doesn't want this thing to continue any more than anybody else, I would have to imagine.
Right, and there's a risk reward calculation. And getting into this, I'm sure Vladimir had a different risk reward calculation than what he is currently experiencing. A report came out just a few days ago. They're trying to get financial remedy from China. Well, that means that they did not calculate the impact of severe sanctions this quickly. Maybe they did calculate it, but they definitely did not calculate that it would have this level of devastation this soon.
Yeah, definitely not. And they might not have known that the US would go so far with their sanctions, that other countries would join in. Not in every way, especially in terms of oil imports. Like there's a lot of Europe that still, isn't in a position to deny that. But and it's continuing. It's risky. It's risky for Biden too. It's risky for some of those other countries in Europe. But I think they've been trying to walk a very careful line and doing a pretty good job of it. Now that said, I want to briefly turn to a different aspect of this. While many saw President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine's address to Congress and were heartened by it, were inspired by it, he got thunderous applause from a lot of Congress. There were some people who were not so impressed. Take a look if you can see if you can spot one. Yeah, with your stuff about the civilians and everything. Look, I have been annoyed by Congress getting overly clappy sometimes too at the State of the Union, but the address had just finished. She has no interest whatsoever. She's, oh, we're getting up now, we're doing a standing thing. Okay, I guess I'll check what's going on Twitter. Now, to be fair, before we jump into this, she was not the only person. Let's be fair, there were other baddies too. This is in the middle of the speech. Take a look at how disinterested Joe Manchin was.
Has not seen for 80 years, and we are asking for a reply, for an answer to this terror from the whole world. Is this a lot to ask?
He's just swiping. He's got his tablet out, he's messaging, or he's playing a game, he's cutting the rope, I don't know, he's dealing with angry birds. I don't know,
he's checking his bank account, man. He's checking on that money.
His investments, yeah. After some of his moves on the climate recently, he's probably feeling pretty good about that. What'd you think?
Yeah, it's fascinating when we catch lawmakers or anyone who has been elected to public office in these situations, and we sometimes say, well, that doesn't mean they don't care. No, that's exactly what it means. That's exactly what this means. We're talking about, we are on the brink of another world war in the United States of America or across the globe in particular. And we have people who are empowered to vote by way of constitutional mandate, vote for articles of war. That's what the Constitution says. That's one of their primary jobs. And while we are hearing from the leader of a nation whose democracy is being assaulted like we have not seen in modern history, individuals like Marjorie Taylor Greene and others who simply do not give a damn about the actual job are in there not paying attention. Now, that tells you who they are. This is who they are. They want to be outside of that chamber. Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to be outside of that chamber so she can continue to be some type of sensational far right wing speaker for white nationalist groups. And Manchin just wants to go out and get some more money in his pocket somehow.
Yeah, you're right. This is who they are. Manchin's not in Washington because he takes politics so seriously.
Right.
He's a senator. It's a duty and also an honor, the greatest deliberative body that the world has ever known. And he takes that seriously. No, he doesn't. He's a rich guy. This is the thing that he has to do to maintain being a rich guy. Right. And Marjorie, I don't even think, sometimes you will not clap as a demonstration. I don't approve of what was said. I don't approve of this person being here. You're not obligated to clap. All that admitted. She doesn't care because she's not a serious person. She doesn't take politics seriously. She doesn't take her obligation to her constituents or to her country seriously. And that's a shame for her district, but it's a demonstration of the sort of people that make it in, unfortunately. These positions, think about the opportunity cost. When you have someone in a position like that has no interest in actually solving problems. If you're doing fine, if your economic class has already won, as the donors who put her into power already have, then it's fine. She can be on her phone, she can do whatever she wants. But for those of us who believe that there are significant problems that have not been addressed by our elected representatives, that are currently wanting for solutions right now, the idea that you could have someone in there it's like, oh, it's a school assembly, I guess I gotta go to. It's just pathetic, and we deserve better.
Yep, and they don't even scare me as much as the people that voted them in. And here's why I say that. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Manchin, Sinema, they are products. They are symptoms of a disease that created them. They are not the disease itself, close to it, but they're not the origin of the disease. The disease comes from the belly of Americans who would prefer that kind of leadership because that leadership says things that they like rather than things that actually move the policy agenda forward. And so yes, you're gonna have people that are catering to racist because Marjorie Taylor Greene has no backbone when it comes to actual policy nor ethics. So she would do things to cater to racist people. That scares me more than just the product of these elected officials is what got them to that position in the first place.
Exactly, yeah, there's always gonna be people in politics and in media that are trying to do this thing. Imagine if we lived in a country where it didn't work. There wasn't an appetite or an audience for it. How great would that be? Senator John Kennedy is not having any of this. Let's tread carefully in Ukraine so that we avoid sparking World War III. No, he believes not only should we get involved militarily, not only should we be involved in a war with Russia, we're already there, as he'll make clear.
This is a war. And in a war, when you have your enemy down, you have to choke him to death. I'm sorry, but that's what wars are about. We need to win this war. We need to win it militarily. We need to win it economically. I don't think we have to do something foolish to achieve either of those ends. But we need to do what's best for the world, the American people, and for the people of Ukraine. And allowing Putin to just continue to get away with doing whatever he wants to do without calling his hand is not going to help us win the war on either front. I'm going to say it again. I know this stuff makes the president nervous, but he just needs to stop thinking about his wishbone and grow a backbone.
Senator.
Man, that guy has never thought of a bad line that he wasn't enthusiastic about spreading on cable news. Well, don't worry. If it seems like he's pushing for us to fight with Russia, he is, but he doesn't think we have to do anything foolish. Just go to war with Russia. And for those of you who might be worried about that, he says, I get that it makes Biden a little bit nervous. No, it makes billions of people nervous, the prospect of two countries with thousands of nukes going to war. It should make you a little bit more nervous. Now that said, he has some specifics he'd like to see done, particularly in regard to transferring aircraft. Take a look at this.
Can have the Ukrainian pilots go directly to Poland and pick up the planes and fly them back. Poland can truck the planes to the Ukrainian-Polish border and have the Ukrainians drag them across. There are a number of ways we can do it. But it just seems to me that President Biden is saying, I don't want President Zelensky to have the air cover that he needs. And I think that is a grave mistake.
Yeah, they offered the weapons. He's not saying he doesn't want him to have the air cover. He says it has to be managed in a particular way to avoid drawing us into the war. Kennedy, I normally say I'm sure he understands that. With Senator John Kennedy, I'm not actually sure that he understands that, or understands that Poland wasn't comfortable with what he's proposing right there. It's not fundamentally about Biden. Poland is worried about being attacked by Russia as well. And I get that it's difficult because President Zelensky desperately wants those planes and more help besides. That said, it does have to be managed in the right way. And Rashad, this GOP senator just doesn't seem to be at all worried about the consequences of any of what he's advocating for.
When you get his age, obviously you look at death completely differently. Here's what's happening. While he talks about Biden taking a shot, a political shot at Biden, what he's really doing is being insensitive to the reality of the majority of Americans who say no to full war. He's being insensitive to the lives that will actually have to be lost in order to fight that war, those who will be injured for life because of that potential war, those who will never walk again because of a potential war, the conflict that remains after the decision. And I'm getting so sick and damn tired of individuals who simply push pins, talking about killing people and blowing things up as the first remedy when there's an international conflict. They lack the humanity necessary to lead. I'm actually glad we're being thoughtful about the engagement and the protocol that has been implemented so far. I would have done everything on day one. If I was Biden, I would have done it all on day one. I would not have graduated the level of sanctions. I would have done it all. It would have been like a cold damn shower in ice, okay? And I get why they're doing it the other way, John, because they want to be able to come to the table, negotiate some variables, and say, well, if you don't do this, we're going to do that. I just would have done it all at one time.
Exactly, yeah, it might be stronger if it hits all at once. Don't give them time to sort of acclimate to it, move money around and things like that. Lock down as much as you can.
Correct.
In one blow, and all of that seems very reasonable. But John Kennedy is not in the reasonable game. That's not his business. No. He's there to say crazy things that will have effects on people, but notably, he will not be one of those people. And that is a constant across so much of what we hear out of the mouths of our politicians. They're saying stuff, but they're inoculated. They're behind massive walls. This stuff won't affect him. He has as much chance of being killed in this war as Vladimir Putin. But for him, it's something to score points on Fox News. Look, if you're sick of what you saw there, if you're sick of politicians like this, if you want to get a little bit less of that in our government, did you know that you can vote for Gary Chambers soon? Gary Chambers is running against John Kennedy, and he may not throw out lines like the wishbone rather than the backbone, but I am pretty sure he will work overtime to keep us from being nuked. And so that's something in his favor. Good guy's been on our show a number of times. I'm sure he could use your support if you want to go take a look at what he has to say at his website and all that. Maybe an alternative to people like John Kennedy.
Yeah, I love Gary, man. Gary was in Atlanta for a fundraiser a few weekends ago, and I could not make the fundraiser. I was in law school at that time, but I sent my check directly to that fundraiser. I hope he does great. I hope he makes a great impact, and I hope he defeats the Republican challenger.
The US positions on that haven't changed, as you just said, when it comes to the no-fly zone. But on the aircraft specifically, the Pentagon said last week that Secretary Austin said they do not support the transfer of additional fighter aircraft at this time. Is that still the United States' position?
Would a strike in Poland on supplies or anything really automatically be met with a forceful response, or simply a conversation amongst allies about how to respond?
There are reports that a Russian drone made its way into Polish airspace before going back to Ukraine and being shot down. Does a drone into Poland count?
Former ambassador to Ukraine, Maria Ivanovich, has been quite outspoken recently, and she said we need to mitigate risk, but it's also true that not taking greater action comes with a risk as well, because Putin is a bully and he only understands strength. Is the president showing enough strength against Putin?
Okay, so that was a little compilation put together by The Intercept of a number of questions coming at Jen Psaki during the White House press briefing. It has one common message there. We're not saying we want to go to war with Russia, but would this be a red line? Would that be a red line? When are you gonna do more? And look, to be clear, I have been skeptical of the claims made that the run up to this war has been as warmongery as in some in the past. The run up with war with Iraq and all that. I don't think that anytime you turn on cable news, you're just gonna be hearing, here's why war is awesome and we should do more of it, which very much has been true of effectively every other military conflict that the US has potentially faced entering into. I don't think that's what we've seen, but you can't deny that some of these reporters, for whatever reason, and maybe Rashad, maybe we can debate why, they really do feel some obligation to ask questions that seem to needle to just push a little bit in the direction of us getting more directly involved. What do you think?
Yeah, it's real simple, man. They want to go back to their particular news agency and have the top story because they were able to goad somebody into saying something that may have been sensational. Effect be damned. They're not concerned about the effect of it. They're concerned about them being connected to a #1 article or headline because they got somebody to say something like that during a White House briefing. And I know people would like to think it's more complex than that and that people are deeper than that. They're not. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I like that the Biden administration, Psaki too, they seem to have been they don't feel like they need to play into it, at least so far. I don't feel like, just to the extent that the reporters, like you said, maybe they just want a big quote, something sensational. Maybe they feel like, you're supposed to ask oppositional questions. Like maybe they think that's what they're supposed to be doing. I personally think it's incredibly dangerous, but Biden hasn't fallen into the trap. I don't see, based on polls, any indication that the American people are wavering in terms of whether they think we should get directly involved. But I am worried about how this situation might evolve. If the war isn't wrapped up in a couple of weeks, if this goes on for 6 months, what are the questions gonna be like then? What are the American people gonna think about this conflict? Once it goes from the biggest news story of every day to the quagmire in Ukraine, is it possible that they might be a little bit more supportive of increased US involvement? How do you see this developing over time?
That's a great question. And here's the choice that we will all have to make as a country. If this conflict continues with no remedy, then what we pay will continue to rise. We will pay more at the gas pump. We will pay more in our consumer products. That's already starting to happen. It will actually increase. And the fundamental decision that Biden will probably need to make within a month is, how is this engagement impacting not only Ukraine, but also the average American citizen? That's a tough call to make, John. I would like to be able to say, I'm okay. I'm okay with paying a little more money for this or that for the sake of democracy. But I don't want to speak for the single mother who has $100 of disposable income and that's it. All right, I don't want to make that call for her. Okay, that's a tough call.
Yeah, and I would feel overall a lot more comfortable if over the past year the Biden administration had shown more of a durable willingness to help out regular Americans too.
That's right.
Put the money into Ukraine. Yeah, do that. I want you to do that. Feel like our massive bloated military budget could probably take care of that anyway. I don't know why new spending is needed when we're spending $800 billion a year on our military, but fine. But also do the child tax credit, do all of the other things that you promised you would do. Give the relief from student debt and all that. Then it would be a little bit easier for people to sign on to, God only knows when these sacrifices will be asked to make will end.
Yeah, and it shows you how schizophrenic our policy is in America. Without a blink, right? We got all of this extra money going to Ukraine, and it's needed, it's necessary, it's appropriate. But at the same time, we have to be critical and question the fact that we have initiatives that are unfunded and underfunded right here in America. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't add up. That's contrary to progress.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's jump to another thing. There's been a little bit of talk about this. I wanted to make sure that we address this. We're gonna start off with this video.
Sasha and Ben Hall tonight. The loss and pain we feel is enormous, but if ever there were a time that the world needed journalists, reporters risking their lives to tell these stories, to tell the truth, it's now. Without a free press, the autocrats win. We will redouble our efforts to honor these colleagues and all reporters in harm's way tonight.
Jennifer Griffin, live at the Pentagon. Your feelings are our feelings tonight. Jennifer, thank you.
As Jennifer Griffin responding to the absolute tragedy of what happened just in the recent past in Ukraine, where veteran camera operator Pierre Zakruski, as well as a local Ukrainian producer Alexandra Kuvshinyova, as well as reporter Benjamin Hall, were injured or killed in attacks in Ukraine. Devastating, a reminder of the bravery of those who operate in the field of war, that go there so that we know what's going on, so that we know the stories of those who are being affected by this war. And it was great to see someone on Fox acknowledging the loss of these lives, because unfortunately, for the most part, despite how clear a tragedy it is, Fox didn't really seem to notice, or if they did, they limited it to just the fact that Pierre Zakruski died. Olga Rudenko noted on Twitter that Fox News initially hadn't even mentioned that the cameraman died, or the local producer died, that the reporter was injured. You can see, by the way, in this photo, this is Alexandra Kuvshinyova right there. Like, this is a person who was equally brave, that was willing to risk so much and lose so much to do her job. And it wasn't really noted. And my worry goes a little bit beyond just that. Just the fact that so many of the shows on Fox didn't even feel like it was worth mentioning that their network had lost someone. It goes beyond that to the Fox approach to people in the field in dangerous circumstances. So Olga goes on to say, a local man who works as a producer says he has been rejecting Fox News offers partly because of their attitude to security. He says he knows details of the attack that tragically took those lives. And you can see here in this thread, talking about, for a while I was asked to work with him. This is Alik Sardarian, says, I always rejected this offer for two reasons. First, I don't want to work with effing Nazis. Second reason is their treatment of security during their work. Most of the producers and fixers in Ukraine feel the same and aren't persuaded even with ridiculous money they offer. That's why they hire inexperienced people and take them in the middle of effing hell for no reason. Inexperienced fixers won't object. And there's a lot more there. He is done with the way that Fox approaches this. Rashad, I have to imagine that if TYT made the decision to send someone into Ukraine, I would hope that first and foremost would be a rock solid commitment to the safety and training of the people that are gonna be there. And according to those who have been courted by Fox, that isn't an obligation from Fox's point of view.
Fox rather sell you a narrative than tell you an actual story. They rather sell a narrative. And when there's something that happens that's contrary to the narrative they're selling, they will try to ignore that narrative. They will try to ignore that thing that's been introduced to that narrative, or they will spin that thing that has been introduced to the narrative. If they really wanted to respect the lives of people who work for Fox News, who have been injured or killed because of this unlawful Russian invasion, then censor or fire Tucker Carlson. Make a statement against him. Do something. Do something, because he's an apologist for the man who's responsible for the death of your colleague. He's the guy protecting the man who's responsible for the death of your colleague. I'd be damned if I'm at a network, a station, on a platform where we have individuals who are supporting the people or the person in charge of killing individuals who work with us. And that's exactly what you have happening on Fox News.
Yeah, imagine if we sent someone and then that day, Rashad's show was, honestly, maybe there's some reason that Russia was right to move in. Should we really jump to oppose it? It's gotta morally great. Think about how we would feel here, how our audience would feel. Right. But for some reason with Fox, look, to Jennifer Griffin's credit, the fact that she's so affected that she's breaking down on air, that is a point in her favor in terms of being affected by what is happening to people that work for her network. But most just ignored it. In response to this, are they gonna be using their clout to push for Fox to change their policies to protect these brave people? And I know people are saying like, doing this sort of war coverage is, that helps you as a reporter. Okay, that's fine, still brave, doesn't matter. Like, yes, there's a benefit potentially to you. It's still dangerous to do it, and they deserve to be protected to the best of a network's ability. Okay, everybody, it's about to get weird. Let's jump into this.
Remember, Adam was there. Remember, Adam came there, then Eve came. So somebody had to start it out. So that means there had to be a God. Because it didn't just some bomb blew up and it started out.
So that is Herschel Walker, candidate for US Senate in Georgia, backed by Trump, as we'll get into, has a very good chance of winning. Talking more theology there than government or politics, but he had even more to say about evolution in this clip.
And I'll tell you something else I heard. Now think about this, because at one time, science said man came from apes. Did it not? That's when you go to the science.
Every time I read or hear that, I think to myself, you just didn't read the same Bible I did.
Well, this was interesting though. If that is true, why are there still apes? Think about it.
Now you're getting too smart for us.
No. Think about this. We have an evolution we've gotten so intelligent that if that is true, why are there still apes? And then the conception of a baby. Let me tell you, science can't do that. They still trying to do it, but it can't because there had to be a God.
There are a lot of problems with every part of that. I do want to be clear though, if any of those claims struck you as something that would blow your mind, something that would change the way that you view the world, I want to be very clear. Every single claim that was made by Herschel Walker has been made ad nauseum. It didn't make sense the first time people postulated it. It doesn't make any more sense right now. To be clear though, there are a lot of people that do find that sort of stuff convincing, and there are a lot of people who have the same sorts of beliefs as Herschel Walker about evolution and conception and all of that. So Rashad, how do we respond to that when someone who wants to run for office, you just cover up and hide, you don't want to respond?
So, John, I cannot tell you, brother, on how many levels I'm embarrassed, okay? Herschel Walker makes me embarrassed to tell people I'm a Christian man. But I'm a Christian who knows God gave me a brain before he gave me a book, and I use it. Passages in the scripture that say things like, slave, obey your master. That's in the Bible. I can't get down with things like that, but I'm glad I got a brain before I got a book. So let's look at what Herschel Walker has said here. This is not the first idiotic statement he has made on the campaign trail. I assume he's somehow trying to connect Darwin's theory to apes and humans, which, by the way, Darwin never said humans came from chimpanzees or apes, never did. That was a narrative adopted by Christian evangelicals to scare individuals into a theocratic or theological core as far as their history is concerned in evolution. They continue to do this with Herschel. They keep giving him platforms. They're not helping him whatsoever. Just a few weeks ago, he was saying that Congressman John Lewis, who's dead, all right, a civil rights hero, he was calling him Senator John Lewis and saying that Congressman John Lewis was against the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. He literally said that during the show, and they agreed with him. They got to stop this foolishness. As I said before, me as a black male, Herschel Walker as a black male, some black person has to do an intervention with this clown immediately.
I think you just gave a great first draft of it. I think someone should run with that, try to help him. And again, like I said, there's a lot of people who believe some version of what he said. I do think though, if you're gonna make claims about science or our understanding of our history, like try to tie them to reality. Again, nobody other than people like Herschel Walker claim that we came from monkeys or apes or whatever. We and the great apes and the chimpanzees and the bonobos and all of that orangutans, we share a common ancestor. There was a thing that gave birth to multiple new species. That is how evolution actually works. I don't know, maybe that'll blow the mind of who is it? Chuck Allen, the guy that he was with. The guy Chuck Allen, by the way, he was loving everything. He was
gaslighting them, John. He was saying things like, "Whoa, buddy, you're smarter than we are." You know, just gaslighting the hell out of them.
But like Herschel Walker said, he made some claim about the apes or whatever, and then Chuck Allen says, every time I hear that, I think they must be reading a different Bible from me. No, that's not where the scientists are learning. It's not from a different edition of the Bible. It's other books entirely. There are many books with a lot of information about these things.
Yeah, and when I get into these debates, sometimes with theologians, and they are just hardcore Holy Bible, the 66 books of the Scripture, I remind them of the Apocryphal. I remind them that the books they read were not actually part of one document. You know, these things were stitched together over time. And there are many that did not make the Bible the canonized version because some of the other Holy Scripture, it was contrary to what they wanted to say, to what they wanted to put in front of other people. And so they left those parts out of Scripture.
Exactly. They were men as flawed.
That's right.
I'm gonna say more flawed than we are now.
Yes, sir.
Here's the issue though. Among Republican primary voters, 70% in a recent poll said Walker is their preferred choice.
Yeah, he's gonna win the primary.
Yeah, 6% second. No, he's gonna win it. And then you've got a Senate race in Georgia. He will be going up against Senator Raphael Warnock. Think about the shift to the Senate going from Raphael Warnock to Herschel Walker, and it could happen. Remember, Georgia was already buried under decades and decades and decades of voter suppression and all sorts of laws and voter purges and all that. And then they added on more last year, making it more difficult for people to organize, more people to register and to vote. That guy could win. He could be giving speeches about Darwin and the apes and all that on the floor of the Senate, Rashad.
And you got to think about the contrast here. I'm actually friends with Dr. Raphael Warnock. I've been friends with him for roughly 20 years. He wanted to run for Senate maybe about 12 years ago. And I remember him and I had this conversation. But he had it in him to do it. He ends up running at the right time. He wins the election. He's a Christian black male also. He is pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, the same church that Dr. King pastored. So he has that legacy. And he has a seminary background. So this guy is completely contrary to that of Herschel Walker. He comes from a place of common sense. He understands how policy should work in American government. He's able to articulate his points with intellectual clarity, completely contrary to what Herschel does. Now, why is Herschel even popular? Because he's a black guy who white people, in particular, the white man Donald Trump, has validated. And why did they validate him? Because they feel as if in order to beat a Raphael Warnock who's a black man, you must need just any other black man who has absolutely nothing compared to the policy background and also the people background as a Raphael Warnock.
100%, you're exactly right. Everybody needs to watch this race, get involved in this race if you don't want that man in the Senate. Okay, we're gonna close out our hour talking about one of the most devastating stories I've heard in some time. Let's jump into this. Metropolitan Police are alleged to have horribly abused and degraded a 15-year-old black student because they suspected that she might have been smoking marijuana. I want you to ready yourself. Some of these details are really dark here. Black child was subjected by police to a strip search at her London school that involved exposure of intimate body parts, according to an official investigation that concluded, I think reasonably, that that racism might have been an influencing factor in the officer's actions. We're gonna return to that, but more on what happened. Police were called by teachers who told the Review that they believed she was smelling strongly of cannabis and suspected she was carrying drugs. Let's be clear, none were found during the subsequent search. No appropriate adult was present during the 15-year-old girl's ordeal, described by senior local authority figures as humiliating, traumatizing, and utterly shocking. It took place without parental consent and in the knowledge that she was menstruating at the time. She was made to bend over, spread her legs, and use her hands to spread her buttocks while coughing. She's now in therapy and self-harming, according to family members. And a statement from the girl, who's only identified as child Q, says, someone walked into the school where I was supposed to feel safe, took me away from the people who were supposed to protect me, and stripped me naked while on my period. She said she didn't know if she would ever feel normal again. And this entire story, Rashad, it just twists my stomach how they could have done any part of this, considering how low the stakes were, because you believed she might have had drugs, which she didn't even have.
I want us to bring a lot of humanity into this story. She's a child. She was forced to strip search as if she was an adult prisoner. That's the kind of strip search they do to people who go to prison. She's a child. It was inappropriate on every level, no matter what drugs they thought she had. And then look at how she has been traumatized. Rejection and betrayal look similar until you look for the details. Most of us will experience rejection in our journey. Very few of us will experience betrayal. Betrayal can only happen when someone who is designed to protect you decides not to. This school system, the authorities were designed, they were there in order to be protectors of this child. They stepped contrary to that, and now the trauma that she is experiencing and will likely experience for years to come is because of the betrayal of that moment. That moment was betrayal to that child. And I hope we see justice here, not only civil justice, but there should be a criminal penalty for what they did.
I honestly could not agree more. Those decisions, no reasonable person thinks those decisions were reasonable.
Right.
And she was betrayed at multiple levels. Like basically you can list every sort of authority figure that we're socialized to believe have our back, that we can trust, that we can go to, and every one of them was twisted into an instrument of her degradation and humiliation. Yep. And so it's no wonder that she's traumatized by this. I want to give you a little bit more of what people around her said. Her mom said, professionals treated her as an adult. She was searched as an adult. Is it because of her skin, her hair? Why her? My daughter is a changed person. We try to reassure her, but looking to the future, we can't say that she will ever recover. And yeah, we know that people, when it comes to sort of criminal investigations and penalties, in their mind, they age up black kids. And they believe, they have the responsibility and the culpability and the risk that I would associate with an adult. Does anyone think that if back when I was 15 at Central High School in Bridgeport, Connecticut, they would have strip searched me if they thought I had marijuana? Does anyone think that? Nobody watching this thinks that, Rashad.
Right. And there it is, right? The element of racism is a universal sport, but it's a team sport that in order for it to permeate, there are others that have to be willing and others that have to protect it through their silence. If people speak up, these things don't happen as often.
Exactly. Just devastating. And a reminder, by the way, this happened in the UK. This was London police doing it. It would have been very easy. You could imagine this happening in almost any city in America, but it is not just an American problem. Now, that said, we unfortunately are out of our first hour. So thank you everyone listening on the podcast, the linear platforms and all that. But there is a lot more to talk about. If you're on Twitch or on YouTube, don't go anywhere. In just a couple minutes, Dr. Rashad and I will be back to break down a number of amazing stories right after this. Lena L sent in a super chat to say, thank you, John and Dr. Richey, for keeping us informed. Thanks for everything that you guys do. Thank you. It is, we were joking about for Joe Manchin, but it is actually a duty and an honor to be able to do this. Sometimes it wears, I'm not gonna lie. I've been experiencing a good amount of anxiety recently. I could use some good news cycles, but it is a privilege to be able to do this. So thank you for watching and supporting us. Goodidley says, tactless question, but what if Zelensky dies? Does he become more powerful than Putin Vader would have imagined, or would it deflate Ukrainian people? I could see it going either way. Hopefully we will never find out. I meant to mention that in our last block, by the way. Like he is broadcasting to Congress from Ukraine. He could be hearing explosions while he's doing that. He could have died while doing that broadcast. I don't care. I'm not interested. Got other stuff going on. What's going on in the news? Let's see what's on TikTok. Like, honestly, that's how these people address like the most consequential stuff happening in the world today.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.